if we're going into 2019.
Yeah.
But guys, Woj is also reporting that free agent guard Tony Parker has agreed to a 2-year, $10 million deal with Charlotte. Parker ending his 17-year run in San Antonio that included 4 NBA championships. Parker ranks first in assists, second in games and minutes, third in field goals, fifth in steals and free throws. And a source just reported that Greg Popovich, he called him in the last hour to inform him of the decision to accept the Charlotte offer. Guys, so Max, I'll start with you on this. With the eventual departure of Kawhi and now this, Max, is this the official end of the Spurs era?
Yeah, I think it is. Normally, again, the way I said Jerry West is the greatest executive of all time. Popovich may be, who else as an executive / coach since Red Auerbach can compare to Greg Popovich? He's incredible, and everyone loves everything about him, on and off the court. Not everything about him, but, they love what he represents, the way he's been a real American leader in a time of need, actually, at least as a public figure. The things he said, he's outspoken, he's righteous, and love Popovich. But given his age, given where the franchise is in terms of resources, draft picks, etc., I know they got Kawhi not with a top pick. They could identify a hidden jewel and polish it over several years, and maybe the Spurs will be right back to where they were. But given Popovich's age, and given what it looks like the Spurs have in the cupboard, which to me, it doesn't look bare, but it doesn't look plentiful either, I think that the Kawhi situation, more to the point of it, but also maybe symbolically the Tony Parker situation, represents the end of an era. Guys, it's the right move for the Spurs. I don't know why they paid Pau Gasol and kept him around, but they shouldn't pay Tony Parker at this point. He's a future Hall of Famer. He's a former Finals MVP. But given his age and the kind of player he is now, they're right to move on from him. But I think symbolically, it does kind of represent the end, certainly, of the last Spurs era, but maybe even of the Popovich era as, the Spurs, this perennial team that could win the championship any year.
Stephen A., before you jump in, let me just add, Woj also reporting that the Spurs did want Parker back, but Parker will take on a significant role with the Hornets, apparently behind Kemba Walker.
Well, he's going to take on a more significant role, Molly, because he's going to play more minutes and he's going to make more money. The Spurs weren't going to pay him $10 million a year, and more importantly, they weren't going to play him more than the 19 minutes per game that he got last year. DeJounte Murray is the new point guard for the San Antonio Spurs. They got a lot of love for him. He's got nice height on him, nice length on him. He's shown some ability as well, and that goes a long way. But I agree with Max in terms of this being the end of an era, and I'll tell you why. The era began not just because of David Robinson, but primarily with the arrival of Tim Duncan. And it wasn't just because of Tim Duncan's greatness. It's because Tim Duncan bought whatever Greg Popovich and the Spurs organization was selling. And so because of that, that's what enabled Greg Popovich to become who he was. Whether he is as great of a man as I know him to be, when you look at stuff for the media purposes, how truculent he could come across and whatever the case may be, those are the kind of things that, you couldn't pull that off unless you were winning, and you couldn't pull that off unless you had somebody like Tim Duncan who always sided with you, stood by your side, and allowed you to coach him. I recall one time when I was covering the Sixers and Larry Brown and Allen Iverson were getting into it, and Allen Iverson got benched for showing up late to a practice one day. That night, Greg Popovich benched Tim Duncan because Greg Popovich and Larry Brown were that close. Tim Duncan hadn't done anything wrong, but Greg Popovich sat him on the bench anyway because he wanted to show that indeed stars can be benched. You don't just sit up there and throw somebody out there and let anybody circumvent rules and regulations just because they're the marquee. There must be order. Greg Popovich was a protege of Larry Brown's. He did it just to help Larry Brown send that kind of message at that particular moment in time. At least that's what I was told by Larry Brown and confidants of Larry Brown. So what you have is a situation where once upon a time that could happen. In this day and age, players have more control than ever before, more control of their own destiny and destination than ever before. And when you have one of the elite players in the game who is as mild-mannered and as low-key as they come, still wanting to depart from the Riverwalk in San Antonio to go to Los Angeles, that is a problem. And then also we forget this. How many times did we talk on this show about how much LeBron James loves and reveres Greg Popovich, considers him an incredible coach, an incredible basketball mind. He has an incredible amount of love for Greg Popovich. I didn't see San Antonio on his list of destinations. He wasn't going there. And so when you look at it from that perspective, you can love, respect, and revere Greg Popovich and truly appreciate the greatness and the first-class status that the San Antonio Spurs have held for years. But in the end, are you clamoring to go there? If you get the choice to choose your destination as a free agent, 99% of the time, the answer is no for the truly marquee guys. And that's the difference.
Max,
you don't have that anymore.
Before you jump in here, I just want to welcome everybody as we cross the 5 o'clock hour here into our First Take afternoon special. Max Kellerman, Stephen A. Smith, Molly Kellerman. Obviously, we're discussing if this is an end of the era for the Spurs with Kawhi wanting out and Parker now leaving. Max?
Yeah, the question is, did the era end with Tim Duncan, really? I mean, look, Kawhi Leonard, they were up 20 points, 23 points on the Warriors at the half when Kawhi got hurt in Game 1. But none of us believed that the Spurs were going to actually beat the Warriors. We figured they might extend after seeing that first half of basketball, 6 games, something like that. But Tim Duncan was a uniquely great player. You mentioned his personality and what he accepted from Popovich. Much in the same way as great as Belichick is, and I sing Belichick's praises, much like Popovich, as not just a great coach, but a great GM, right? And I brought up Red Auerbach. Also, he had Bill Russell. Popovich had Tim Duncan. Obviously, Belichick has Tom Brady. These on-the-court kind of extensions of the coach/GM, the player leaders. There are very few players throughout history like Bill Russell or Tim Duncan or Tom Brady. So as much as I credit Popovich, a lot of it may have been, Popovich was fortunate. He had a guy like Duncan. Duncan's gone, and I don't think it's coincidental that it seems to fall apart in his absence.
We got to leave it there, guys. Still to come here on this First Take afternoon special, does LeBron's move to L.A. mean that Magic's Lakers are now on the same level with the Rockets? The fella's answer might surprise you. That's next. Today is the first day that Chris Paul can sign his 4-year, $160 million extension with the Rockets. Houston lost Trevor Ariza on free agency to the Suns, while Clint Capella is a restricted free agent but expected to be back with the team. Now, the Lakers, on the other hand, have made a ton of moves in free agency with the additions of LeBron James, JaVale McGee, Lance Stevenson, and Rajon Rondo to a talented young core. Stephen A., let me ask you this. Are the Lakers close to the Rockets now?
I think they're closer. I think the Rockets need to get their hands on somebody like Carmelo Anthony. I think if the Rockets don't find a way to replace what Trevor Ariza gave them, they're going to suffer because of it. They're still going to be a good team. They're still going to make the playoffs. They're still going to be one of the top 3 or 4 teams within the Western Conference. But when we talk about their formidability, you've got to make up for the loss of Trevor Ariza. Now, Carmelo Anthony is not going to do that on the defensive end, but he should be able to do that on the offensive end. And his potency as an offensive player with the right personnel and playing the right position as opposed to playing out of position and looking out of sync, I definitely think bodes well for the Houston Rockets. You have to make up for the loss of Trevor Ariza. We can't sit here and act like losing Trevor Ariza is no big deal. It's a very big deal. You had to lose him to take care of CP3. You had to lose him to take care of Clint Capella. But make no mistake, you've taken a step back unless you offset the loss of Trevor Ariza. And if you've taken a step back with the Lakers having arrived and taking a step forward, I definitely think that puts them in a closer position to compete with the Houston Rockets if you don't replace Trevor Ariza. I definitely believe that.
Well, of course they're closer. They got LeBron James. But they are not close to the Houston Rockets yet. Not really close. Not actually. Now, we'll see. They get Kawhi Leonard. We'll reevaluate. Even if the Lakers, see, I see it differently. If the Lakers get Carmelo, I think Carmelo would work well with LeBron. I do not see him as a fit in Houston. In fact, I would think he might make the Houston Rockets worse, not better. Recall when the Oklahoma City Thunder got Carmelo, I wasn't so sure that it definitely made them the best matchup for the Warriors. I wasn't sure they were better than the Rockets, and in fact, they weren't nearly as good as the Rockets. The Rockets were way better than them, and partly that was Carmelo not having a very good effect on that team. So Carmelo, at this point in his career, especially the way the league has changed, it depends where he fits in. If he goes to the Lakers, maybe they've caught up to the Rockets a little bit more because especially in the playoffs, you know, the Rockets will have a better regular season record, but we'll see what happens playoff time. But I don't see how he replaces Trevor Ariza on that team. He's the opposite of really a 3-and-D guy, which is really what Trevor Ariza is. He's the poster child for that nowadays. The point is this about the Rockets. They missed their window, in my opinion. I thought that going into the playoffs, they were going to unseat the Warriors. And I think events proved me right because Chris Paul gets hurt, is not available in Game 7, and without one of their two best players, not there, their emotional leader, and having one of the worst shooting nights in the history of basketball from outside, and what they do is shoot from the outside, they still only lost by single digits. To me, it is clear, had Chris Paul played for the Rockets that game, the Rockets beat the Warriors. But I think that's it. That was their opportunity. The Warriors are even more experienced now. They're feeling themselves more. They've shown the ability to turn it on, at least in the finals, where they swept the Cavs. They, even against the Rockets, took advantage of opportunities. And now they've added a guy who, in Boogie Cousins, if he can just get healthy before the playoffs start, get his basketball legs under him, they're going to be impossible on offense. Impossible. Meantime, the Rockets lose Trevor Ariza. You're right, Stephen A. They still have to retain Clint Capella, and they're not going to have the resources left to get any other 3-and-D guy who fits in the way Trevor Ariza did. I think the Rockets' opportunity was last postseason. I picked them to win. I thought I was actually proven right by events. They got very unlucky. But unless, barring some unforeseen move by Houston, and I don't think it's Carmelo Anthony, I think that ship has sailed.
Well, I think that a lot of people have ignored what they saw from the Golden State Warriors in these playoffs. There was some vulnerability there. And I think that obviously we think that DeMarcus Cousins offsets that with his arrival. Could happen, but we don't know that to be the case yet. Draymond Green has got to improve on his jump shot, obviously. Kevin Durant and those guys got to continue to remain in sync. You hear some rumblings every now and then about, everything is cool, and then another minute you hear things are not so cool. Obviously, when I look at the Houston Rockets, and how the Houston Rockets got all up in the Golden State Warriors, just all up in their chest. That resonated with me because that showed a recipe for their discomfort. The fact that you can make them a bit uncomfortable. You can make them press a little bit. So I think all of those things are things to consider when you look at the Lakers, you look at the Rockets, and you look at other teams, particularly with LeBron in L.A. right now, because I don't think moves have stopped being made, and I think other things are going to happen within the conference because people have noticed those very vulnerabilities that I just alluded to.
Yeah, but ultimately you're still saying that Houston has the edge, obviously just that the Lakers are coming. It's getting closer.
The Lakers are coming.
Of course.
The Lakers are coming.
All right. Still to come, guys, Carmelo is reportedly on his way out of OKC. Wait until you hear where Stephen A. says he wants to go. That's next on this special edition of First Take. People, stay here.
You should work out a buyout. And Melo should get the hell up out of there and join LeBron James. It's as simple as that. Props to the Thunder for finally spending those dollars. They've spent it in the past, but not when they needed to. But they're daily doing that now. But Carmelo should join LeBron ASAP.
Okay, that was Stephen A. yesterday, and earlier in today's show, Stephen A., you said Melo wants to actually go to Houston. This after a report from Woj and Royce Young saying that Melo and the Thunder are working on his exit, obviously, guys, from OKC. Max, I'll start with you. Would Melo be a good fit in Houston?
No, I don't think so. In Houston, I think he's a bad fit. First of all, recall Linsanity in New York. Carmelo was hurt, and Jeremy Lin was electrifying New York, and they couldn't lose practically, until LeBron and Dwayne Wade had enough of it and shut them down. But LeBron and Dwayne Wade could do that to anybody. And Jeremy Lin wasn't a great player, but he's a very good player who was running D'Antoni's system. He was D'Antoni's muse, the way Steve Nash had been, the way James Harden is now. And I mentioned before, hey, Red Auerbach had Bill Russell, and Popovich had Tim Duncan, and Belichick has Tom Brady. Well, D'Antoni's needed his guy too. And Jeremy Lin appeared to be that guy, and everyone said, oh, Carmelo's going to stop the ball. It's going to upset everything when he comes back. And I was skeptical. I thought, no, Carmelo's a winning player. Carmelo stopped the ball, and it was a problem. And next thing you knew, Jeremy Lin was out of town. I don't see where Carmelo fits into a D'Antoni team. I saw how he did not fit into an OKC team. I think Carmelo at this stage in his career and the way the game has changed, Stephen A., needs to be used by a player and a coach who know how to get the best out of him. Chris Paul is one of those guys, I think. Team USA, he did that as the point guard. Carmelo would often be the leading scorer. But not with D'Antoni. Meanwhile, the Lakers I look at, Stephen A., and I think he's a very good fit there with LeBron. I think LeBron would be able to get the best out of Carmelo.
Well, I personally think that L.A. would be the best fit because I think playing with LeBron would be best for Carmelo Anthony, considering the way that LeBron plays and considering the fact that, he wouldn't hesitate to give up the ball to Melo for an open shot while he did everything else. That's the way that LeBron can end up being, and I think that's incredibly beneficial to Carmelo Anthony. All I'm saying is that Houston appears to be a likely landing spot as opposed to L.A. But who knows what will happen? We shall see. Let me get to your point about Linsanity, because I think that, I can't believe that you don't get this. Linsanity was on a run. It was something special to watch for about a month to 6 weeks. But Carmelo knew what anybody with two eyes that knows basketball knew. That Linsanity, Jeremy Lin, is a decent basketball player. But he wasn't a star, wasn't going to be a star. And the bottom line is, if you're Carmelo Anthony, you'll be damned if you're going to concede control of the franchise to somebody that's just on a month to 6 week run that will reach a quick expiration, which is exactly what ended up happening. That would not be the case in Houston. What Jeremy Lin did in 6 weeks, Chris Paul has been doing for his entire career. Chris Paul is one of the quintessential elite, future Hall of Fame, great point guards that this game has ever seen. What a floor general extraordinaire he is, not to mention best friends with Melo. And so when you look at CP3 in Houston, what he brings to the table when he is healthy, there is no way in hell that it would be the similar or same situation to what happened with Jeremy Lin. Jeremy Lin was a puppy in New York City. They had absolutely nothing to sell. Nobody saw him coming. He came out of nowhere. Give him mad credit. He played lights out for about 6 weeks, and Melo knew what everybody else knew, that eventually he would get figured out and exposed as the average player that he is. And that's exactly what happened.
He wasn't a superstar. No, I didn't look. Jeremy Lin didn't turn out to be a superstar, but he wound up taking a good deal with a poison pill in it from Houston, and then wasn't coached by D'Antoni anymore. And then he got hurt. I mean, that's what happened with Jeremy Lin. He was a good player.
How was he coached by D'Antoni in New York but not Houston?
When he went to Houston, D'Antoni wasn't there initially. Unless I'm remembering wrong.
I know. No, you're not remembering wrong. Go ahead.
The point is that not that it's the Jeremy Lin story here, Stephen A. It's just that he had a bad experience, or rather D'Antoni did, with Carmelo Anthony. The two of them didn't seem to fit. And partly that's because I think D'Antoni is one of the prime kind of generators of this modern NBA spread pick and roll system, right? The three ball, the high percentage shots, either in the paint or from three. Not a lot of long range twos, which Carmelo's been known for a lot of his career. But look at what Houston actually just had in Trevor Ariza and what they probably are looking for. A 3-and-D guy. What Carmelo just showed in Houston, in OKC, is he can't even be a 3 guy if it's a catch and shoot. He was unable to be just a 3 guy, let alone a 3-and-D guy. He ain't never going to be a D guy. But just so if you're looking to replace a 3-and-D guy who doesn't really need the ball, you're going to replace him with Carmelo Anthony? I just don't see it, especially for a D'Antoni team. And Stephen A., for a team that got this close to getting over the Warriors to the finals.
Well, you also got to remember, one of the things, you might have seen P.J. Tucker and Trevor Ariza get loose, Eric Gordon doing what he did coming off the bench, getting loose, showing what he's capable of doing. Certainly didn't hurt Gerald Green, who they just resigned to a veteran minimum $2.4 million. Good signing by Daryl Morey on that, because Gerald Green definitely needs to remain on that roster. But But in the same breath that we say that, I emphasize CP3 and James Harden, mainly CP3. He's your floor general. And what you had is a situation where there were times when CP3 was ISO'd, James Harden was ISO'd. That spread pick and roll that you're talking about, Houston didn't do that all the time. There's been plenty of times when we saw James Harden simply break down a defense, dance on them, and embarrass brothers. We saw that with Chris Paul as well, which means there are modifications that has taken place with D'Antoni, who once upon a time never really allowed that with anybody else. As times have changed, he has adjusted, and I think that he could adjust with a Carmelo Anthony in his lineup instead of a Trevor Ariza. Now, if Carmelo Anthony's replacing Kawhi or somebody, you have a point. No disrespect whatsoever, because Trevor Ariza can play, but he's replacing Trevor Ariza. I think Carmelo Anthony could be relied upon to do that, if that happened.
I mean, if you're talking in a vacuum, who has more value, you could argue Carmelo Anthony. But on the Rockets, I don't know. I mean, listen, the best argument for Carmelo on the Rockets is they don't have any money or resources to get any better. They're going to be capped out once they sign Capella. And so they're going to backslide a little compared to the Warriors, who may have improved if Boogie is healthy, right? So what do? You take a shot. You roll the dice on a guy like Carmelo. Maybe he'll make you worse, but what are your options? But I think a more prudent, actually, course of action for the Rockets is to just go and find a 3-and-D guy that you can get for the money, or for some exception, or out of the D League. I think that's actually a safer bet for a team that came as close as they did, particularly when Ariza was terrible in that Game 7. I think for a team like the Lakers, who wouldn't have to give up anything, basically, to get Carmelo Anthony and put him with Rondo and LeBron, that to me just makes more sense. The Rockets are too close and have sort of are too close to gamble like that.
I asked Max this earlier with Kuzma and LeBron and Ingram. Don't you think LA, I know you said it's a better option than Houston, don't you think that front court's too crowded to have him?
Well, I don't know if it's too crowded, because I think that Kuzma could take a step back. He could come off the bench for you. He could do some things. Number one, Ingram himself, you know, he's interchangeable as well. I think that one impediment to Melo arriving in L.A., whether it's coming off the bench or being in the lineup, because of the presence of Kuzma along with Ingram, I think Melo would find himself at the 4 spot a lot more than he would prefer, which is something that obviously he didn't cater, you know, he didn't adjust well to playing in Oklahoma City. That could be an impediment to such an argument. It could also be the thing that leads him to Houston and away from L.A. We'll see what happens. I don't know what's going to happen. I think Melo playing with LeBron gives him the best chance of getting to the NBA Finals, but I also like the idea of him replacing Trevor Ariza, because I think that Houston could have used a little bit more offense against Golden State. That would have helped him, because he wasn't going to stop Golden State anyway.
Max, let me ask you
Molly,
this.
When you bring
go
up,
ahead. Yep. Go ahead.
Well, when you bring up the surplus in the front court, to me, the signing of Lance Stevenson, if they were to get Carmelo Anthony, to me, it presages it lays the groundwork for moving those young assets in the front court, Ingram and or Kuzma, for a Kawhi Leonard or
giving them some
another
flexibility.
premium piece.
Yep, no, that makes sense. Before we move on, though, I just want to ask you guys, all right, so pretend it's not Houston or LA. Is there any other place that you potentially could see him going, or you think he'd be a good fit?
I think Melo would be an absolute fool to end up anywhere but one of those two places. He goes anywhere else other than those two places, you know, unless he went to Golden State, which can't happen now that they spent that money on Boogie Cousins. Outside of Golden State, I think he'd be an absolute fool to end up in any place other than LA or Houston.
In a hard, it's not a hard cap, but in a cap league, in a salary cap league, anytime you can get a guy like Carmelo Anthony, and he's slipped, and the game has changed out from under his feet. He's not as valuable as he once was, even if he was still in his prime, because the game has changed. But if you can get a guy that skilled for like $5 million or less, which it looks like is going to happen, he could really help just about any team.
All right, fair enough. We'll leave it there. Guys, we have breaking news on Dwight Howard. We'll get into that after the break. And LeBron is gone, but Kevin Love's still a Cavalier. Where should Love want to go if the Cavs try to move him? First take coming right back.